Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Today, our topic is going to be about, and somewhat related to the fact that our recently Frank Chopp, who was a longtime Speaker of the House in Washington State, how he recently passed away over the weekend. And you saw a number of different articles out there. He was the longest-serving House Speaker in the history of the state of Washington, and even for a few years before he was the lone Speaker of the House, he was actually shared that role for a couple years when the Republicans and the Democrats actually had a tied number of legislators in Olympia back between, I think it was 1998 and 2002. So, and before that, he was very engaged in the political process. He'd been elected to office from the early 90s. So he's been around the block a long, long time. Those of us who have had to deal with the legislature anytime in the last couple decades, Frank Chopp is usually a big part of that process. And so his recent passage is kind of a big deal. And we've definitely lost a few people over the last few years who were well known in Washington State's political process. And this is kind of a changing of the guard kind of thing here when we look back on it. Now, one thing I'm going to point out, usually when somebody talks about somebody who's passed away, they talk about their good memories they might have had with that person. My memories with Frank Chopp really more involved with directly, and I've never actually met him before, but it was me filing a Public Disclosure Commission complaint, PDC complaint, and triggering an Attorney General lawsuit against him back in 2017. It was early 2017 when that was kicked off. And basically what this was is I was in the middle of dealing with big political fights all over the place. Had just helped flip the county commission in Thurston County, and the state Democrat Party was really mad at me, and they were filing lots of complaints at me, and so I was pushing back, filing complaints. Discovered essentially that nobody was really following the campaign finance law, and I was identifying people like Frank Chopp who basically were violating the law themselves with their campaign finance abuse of the statute. In this case, he was using money personally where he was spending campaign money for personal benefit, and he was also just not reporting information. He was concealing information from the public, and that's what helped trigger the Attorney General lawsuit. And the one thing that I did note at the time is that even though being in a political fight like this, and he wasn't terribly happy with me, at the end of the day, Frank Chopp just paid the fine. He didn't make a big stink out of it. He found a way to settle quickly. Obviously, he got the good guy treatment. Most Democrats do. The Attorney General only reserved its high levels of abuse for Republicans or Republican-leaning groups. However, there was a lot of contrast between him and this article that I wrote about him a number of years ago was showing how, listen, Frank Chopp just paid his fine and moved on. Other senators, like Senator Sam Hunt, they really played the victim card and whined about how it was unfair for them to follow the law, even though they abused the rest of us all the time. And that was an interesting dynamic difference, since one of the things that I remember about Frank Chopp specifically is he generally was just focused on getting the business done and just moving ahead. And, the left, I think, is going to frequently abuse him. And if you look at his Wikipedia page, for example, or leftist articles about him, particularly the religiously progressive left in Washington State who believe in socialism, they do not like Frank Chopp. He had a lot of enemies on the left because he was viewed as somebody who wasn't willing to let them push the craziest agenda items that they wanted out there. Now, the other thing is I'd been pretty critical of Frank Chopp for his involvement with Lehigh and what really appeared to me and to many outside observers to be a very corrupt political influence scheme where he would direct millions and millions of dollars from the state or from King County and direct them to his nonprofit where he was paid a six-figure salary to sit on the board, where he had his wife and his daughter work at various times. And it really looked like more of a kickback scheme operation that he had there. Lehigh has never been a very good organization. They've done a lot of terrible damage. They wasted a lot of money, and they've done anything except for solve the homeless problem. They've certainly been involved in making sure that problem is perpetuated because it's the eternal grift. We've talked about that before. Frank Chopp was knee-deep in that process. He was before he got in the legislature, and he really flooded the zone when it came to kicking a lot of cash over to that program while he was there. Despite that, Frank Chopp was substantially better than the current crop of legislators who have basically taken his place. I will point out that the current two leaders in the state house, Lori Jenkins, who in the pink here is actually the state house speaker right now. I did get her fined about $300 a while ago with a PAC that she had run just as she was getting appointed to be speaker, and Frank Chopp was leaving that position. And then Monica Stonier, who's essentially trying to undermine Lori Jenkins and fight for that position as well. I was forced to file a citizen action notice case against her a number of years ago for also her campaign finance violations, which were common and frequent. And in that case, she had to settle that for a little over $6,000 a couple years ago. So I've had this interaction. Seems like every time there's a Democrat leader who comes in there, breaking the law is just part of what they do. And I've had this interaction with both of them in the past. And that's kind of that new leadership that's taken over after Frank Chopp left. And frankly, there's all kinds of weird, dumb, strange, and bizarre ideas that are coming through this current crop of Democrats in Olympia, which is raising a lot of concern around the state and a lot of mockery around the nation as people look at this group of people and their crazy taxing ideas, taxing cow flatulence, banning wood stoves, releasing violent felons and sex predators as early as possible, raising taxes on everything, and of course, squandering every penny they get into just wasted programs all over the place. So this is a big change from Frank Chopp. Doesn't make Frank Chopp a saint, but it's certainly quite different than when he was in office. Then I have to think and imagine that as Frank Chopp was seeing the last waning days of his life, and he was looking at his legacy in Olympia, and particularly the clowns who had taken over his position there, he had to marvel at the mess that's been left behind. And even though when he was there, I think he tried to keep things on a fairly even keel, tried to make sure that although he was definitely a leftist, he was still making sure that they kept the grift down to basically keeping it just below a boil so that the voters wouldn't rebel against the Democrats. And I think when he looked at who's taken over his place, I doubt he can be very happy with what's left of his legacy. Frank Chopp won't be remembered fondly by the Democrats. Funny thing is, he'll probably be remembered a little bit more fondly by Republicans, if for no other reason than he might have been the last sane speaker of the Washington State legislature that we've had in a long time. So times change. People hand over the reins to new generations. But at the end of the day, it's up to you and I to keep holding these people accountable. You don't have to file PDC complaints just like me, although it never hurts to have more people doing that too. But we have to pay attention to who these people are. It really does matter. It's not just about the letter next to their name or the party affiliation. It's about having people in there that are a little bit more mature than clowns. And unfortunately, there's a little too many clowns in Olympia today. So it's up to you and I to hold them accountable and to pay attention. We have to be willing to show up to do that because, as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.